my goblins and gremlins, and welcome back to the chaos and Happy New Year. Kinda. Like, okay, I know I'm a month late, but holidays and whatever. Anyways, for those of you who had New Year's resolutions, how's it going? Have you kept it through the month? Did you use that gym membership? I'm sure you did. I'm sure you're doing great. I don't really do New Year's resolutions, but I do try and give myself like goals, like things that I want to achieve within the next year, like very normal goals, like achievable things, nothing like, oh, I want to lose 100 pounds in a year or something stupid like that, but like, you know, read 40 books throughout the year or something like that. Which, now that I say that, seems like a lot, but there's some people who do like 100 book challenge in a year, and I'm like, no.
No! You must not read from the book!
Me and dyslexia cannot do that. I do have a bunch of plans for this channel specifically, and I'm super excited to start going through with it, and I hope you will stick along for the ride, and let's see where this takes us. Anyways, if you didn't gather from the title, we are continuing our Steven Universe redesigns of the crystal gems. Today we are specifically redesigning Pearl in the dark academia aesthetic. Academia, one of those two. If you haven't seen it, last time we did do a redesign of Amethyst. I will link that down below if you would like to see that. And when I tell you that I have no idea what I'm doing, I feel like that video is the embodiment of that. Like, I have this idea that I would do all this stuff, and but I feel like I learned from my mistakes. Okay, so to start, Pearl is essentially the bird mom of the crystal gems. And honestly, if you haven't seen Steven Universe, go watch it. Now, right now, do it. Or don't, I'm not your mom. But Pearl is very much a by-the-book type of person. She has a lot of interest in science, sword fighting, and she's very literal almost, and very clean. Like, I don't know, she's a very particular individual. So I really thought that dark academia might work really well for her, considering it's prioritizing knowledge. Specifically, Wikipedia says dark academia is an internet aesthetic and subculture concerned with higher education, the arts, and literature, or an idealized version thereof. The fashion of the 1930s and attendance at Oxbridge, Ivy League schools, and prep schools of the period. A number of the articles of clothing most associated with the aesthetic are cardigans, blazers, dress shirts, plaid skirts,
one eternity later,
and clothing made of houndstooth and tweed. Its color palette consisting of many black, white, beige, browns, dark green, and occasionally navy blue. All that to say, is a bunch of old-timey nerds that look kind of cute, and Pearl is a thousands of years old nerd, so it fits. Let's get into it. To start, instead of attempting to go into the paper doll clothing options like I did with Amethyst, I jumped right into setting up the scene. I did cut a good chunk of me trying to figure out how to do perspective again, because I did a lot of nothing and I don't feel like torturing you guys. For now. So I decided to put Pearl sitting on the couch in the temple living room, which gets remodeled rather frequently. So this is the Steven Universe future version, which you can see me referencing in the top right corner. The pose did give me some trouble, probably because I went with a feet out approach for some reason. So the pose I put Pearl in is going to look wildly incorrect for quite a while. I'm sorry. But the pose I do end up landing on for her is this cozy, feet up on the chase lounge thing with a book on her lap, and looking over at the temple door that leads to the different gem rooms. She's smiling slightly, like someone just entered the room just off screen. Originally, I had started this drawing right after I finished the amethyst one in like September, where I actually had her stand in front of a chalkboard, teaching rocket science and little homeworld. It was a really great idea in my opinion, but when the holidays came around and I didn't touch it for a couple months, I came back and I hated every bit of it. So I deleted it and started over entirely, and I am honestly glad I did start over because I adore how this turns out. Now, here I am working on Pearl's hair, which is essentially a very pointy, slanted bob thing, which is pretty hard for me to translate in my semi-realism style, so I lean more into making a bob of sorts and just sort of hinting at the pointy hair in the original character's design. I, of course, give her her iconic nose, but make it more human-looking rather than like a beak. And finally get to fixing this pose after sending it to an art friend of mine asking for critique, which helped a lot. So I resize and redraw the back leg and rework the facial proportions. I do that a few times actually. And then I finally fixed the way the book is sitting because how I drew it originally didn't make any sense. And then hands. You think after my first video I would have more success with hands, but nope. Hands are still hard as heck.
That's what she said.
And now it's time for the clothes, which are essentially the reference on the left of a turtleneck and a skirt combo I pulled from Pinterest after searching dark academia because I am truly creative. But with Pearl Sketched, I move on to inking the background. Now, I do use a rather rough brush to do the background as I want to ensure that it still has a sort of unrefined and soft look to it as I try to sound like I'm smart. But mostly to push the focus more on Pearl since she's sitting off center and I want her to be the focal point. Now, because I didn't actually do a lot of sketching in the background to start, I do spend a lot of time here figuring out what to put in the background and mostly drawing book spines on the shelves, but I think overall I like how I changed the decor in the room to fit the dark academia aesthetic. So here I bring in yet another reference because on the shelf of the living room is Rose's broken sword, and while it does clash a lot with the aesthetic by ways of color, I wanted to keep it in there for so many reasons, and it does later play into my favor as it helps with tying the rose painting at the top of the stairs to the rest of the image. I feel like the speed draw does not portray anything near how long I spent on that sword alone, much less the rest of the shelf, as I really found myself getting lost in the details and having a bit too much fun. This is probably why I find it so hard to just do a character on a blank background. I love backgrounds so much, and an image just feels so incomplete without it. I'm sure that I'll need to omit such details backgrounds in the future just for the sake of speed, but today is not that day. What's funny is, at the end of this, I was thinking I should do more with making the spines of the books on the shelves look more like a book with adding like fake writing. But I think if I did that, this video would be twice the length. I also had to resist the urge to give her a cup of tea or coffee sitting on the coffee table, as Pearl doesn't like eating or specifically digesting because it feels gross, which, like, valid, but what about the aesthetics? So after inking the background, I moved on to inking Pearl, and after having spent a long time just kind of seeing her in the corner of my eye while I worked on everything else, I finally had a better vision of what I wanted her to look like and was even figuring out some of the colors at this point, though not well enough. But one thing I do change is the higher socks for folded lacy socks, which I think went better with those shoes that I drew for her sitting on the floor, because there's no way Bird Mom would let shoes be on the couch. Another thing I did was choose a much more crisp brush for inking Pearl, as to make her stand out a bit more as our focal point. And later, she's the only part of this piece that gets shaded. I will say the hardest part of this for me, after figuring out the pose, was adding the folds and wrinkles to the clothes, as I do 100% need more practice with it, but I think I did pretty decent for the time being. Jumping around a little bit, I do realize it's probably time for me to fully figure out what to do with these plants and, give them leaves. Of course, what you don't see is me zooming in to get each pixel in the right place for no reason. But as it's a repeating pattern of leaves, it was honestly pretty therapeutic, but definitely a waste of time, since I could have just implied the leaves rather than drawing them individually. Randomly, right after I decided to start working on the leaves in the second plant, I realized I forgot to give Pearl the star necklace I wanted her to have, because despite the aesthetic being super dull and simple, I absolutely need the star branding to be there. And then I finally finish out this plant. So after adding a few more details in the background and cleaning up some lines here and there, I do start adding color. Slight flash warning, as this does go pretty fast and looks insane sped up, especially because specific shades at the beginning throw me off a bit, but I think by the end the colors fit the vibe well and still look recognizable for being the same living room from the show. I do go through and individually color each book spine with different shades of brown, which, to be honest, I kind of hated. It just got annoying at this point, and I almost didn't finish the drawing because of this being just annoying and tedious, which is weird because I got super focused on doing individual leaves. It doesn't make any sense, but it's fine. It was also super late at this point, but it's whatever. And finally, we are in the home stretch, color picking from the scenes where Pearl is in shadow. I get her pearl and skin tone, and then I figure out how I want to color her clothes to fit the aesthetic but also still be Pearl. And then I finally start shading, dreading the fact that I landed on a turtleneck for her shirt even more as I try to figure out how the light would hit. And I keep the light source as the ceiling lamp you see in the reference I used for the room, lighting things up from the top right to the bottom left. This part of rendering is a struggle for me, so I tend to skip it and leave things just as flat colors, which I think I did with the amethyst drawing, but I didn't want to do that for this one. In the end, I really like how it comes out, and I would love to hear what you think. And there you have it. It's Pearl, but in a dark academia aesthetic. It's honestly so nice to be able to sit down and just draw fan art. Since as a teenager, preteen, you know, that time that people normally draw a lot of fan art, I pretended I was an art snob and looked down on it and thought that it was uncreative and stealing to draw fan art. And I was just doing that to impress the people around me, when in reality I really wanted to draw fan art, but I was too scared to do so because I didn't want to draw my favorite characters badly. But anyways, I am super excited for the next and the last part in the series, which is Garnet. So if you want to see that, subscribe, because that's how you'll get informed that I do things. I don't know how people do this. You do what you want. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. So yeah, bye, I guess. We doing the crab stance. We doing the crab stance. We doing the crab stance. I seriously need music to play or something during this, because like, haha funny, what's your gender, crab stance or scree, but like music would make this so much better. We doing the crab stance.